Welcome back, Dylan. Found in the back of Dylan's world history notebook after his death. Goals: get out of Ludlow, throw a no-hitter, raise my GPA to 3.5, get out of Ludlow, make some money, find a way to break up with Addie without hurting her feelings, win a baseball scholarship, stop fighting with my dad about everything, get out of this fucking town. Chapter 14. Instead of having another painful dinner at dinner, I told Cassie I'd meet her at the diner at the end of her late afternoon shift and we could grab a bite. The day was overcast, like all of them since the fall festival, but the air was mild and I decided to take advantage of the weather and walk uptown instead of driving. I was just turning the corner toward the park when I spotted Garrett pulling his squad car into a parking spot closest to the clumps of trees that were the preferred destination for teenage lovers or kids smoking pot. One of the few places in Ludlow where you could at least make an attempt at privacy. I raised my hand in a reluctant wave, but Garrett didn't see me. He got out of the car, head down, and moved into the trees, walking fast. Without making a conscious decision to do it, I stepped off the sidewalk and onto the grass, heading across the park in the direction Garrett had disappeared. Furtive wasn't generally Garrett's style, and my curiosity was getting the best of me. What was he doing? I had no business following him, but my feet kept moving forward regardless. Once I was among the trees, ground littered with sticks and seed pods, I stopped and listened for the sound of footsteps over fallen leaves. The murmurs of voices, but there was nothing. I continued walking, telling myself I'd turn around in 2 minutes when a moan floated towards me on the breeze. I stopped, cocked my head. Maybe it had been a dog, but it came again, low and guttural. Definitely human. Pleasure or pain, it was hard to tell. I stepped cautiously in the direction of the sound, making sure not to tread on anything that would give my presence away. Ahead of me was a huge oak, its trunk riddled with scars from overzealous teenagers anxious to leave evidence of their passing, and I ducked behind it. The moan came again, and I peered around the tree, feeling faintly ridiculous. It was 2 people against a tree, and at first, all I can register was Garrett's bare ass pumping away and her fingernails digging in, long and ragged and painted with chip red polish. Then I noticed his duty belt tossed carelessly on the ground. Sheriff Baker would have his badge for that if he knew, never mind the screwing on duty. Garrett turned his face, and I can see his mouth hanging open like an overheated dog's. I would have bet good money the woman pinned to the tree was not his girlfriend. Her bleached blonde hair dark at the roots, her limbs skinny and pale. Her face pinged something inside of me, but I couldn't place her. She moaned again, her eyes screwed tightly shut. I still, for the life of me, couldn't have said whether the sound was pleasure or pain. Maybe a combination of both, considering her ass was getting slammed into a tree bark. And I knew from experience that Garrett was probably going to have a much better time than she was. As if to prove my point, Garrett shoved into her, making me wince in sympathy. The woman cried out, but Garrett didn't slow his pace. Suddenly, what had been a little amusing felt anything but. The sandwich I had for lunch sitting leaded in my stomach. I pushed away from the trees, fingers slipping over rough bark where something had been hacked into the trunk. I glanced down, snatched my hand back from where it was resting on the gouged out heart, a pair of initials carved inside. I stumbled sideways and stepped down hard on a fallen branch, the crack sending a clatter of birds whirling skyward. "What the fuck?" I heard Garrett say, but I was already running, darting between trees, breathing whistling out of me. I didn't look back, but I heard the thud of footsteps, each one gaining on me. My shoulder blades tense, my body ready to be yanked backwards. I leaped over a divot in the ground, adrenaline shooting through me like lightning, and my foot came down wrong on a rotting mass of slippery leaves. I hit the ground, arms outstretched, and the breath whooshing out of me. I rolled over, mouth sucking air, waiting for Garrett's angry face above me. But everything was silent and still, only gray skies bearing down on me between branches. I could have sworn I felt Garrett's fingertips brushing the back of my neck, had prepared myself for what he might do when he caught me. I felt a lot of things towards Garrett Bloom in my life: lust, annoyance, irritation, but until now, fear had never been one of them. But something about his face when the woman moaned, his disregard for anything but his pleasure, had sent unease rippling along my spine. I don't know why I was surprised that Garrett had a dark side. Didn't most people? Maybe none of us were the same when we thought no one was watching. Ooh, who Garrett with? If the fall festival was the family-friendly tradition in Ludlow, the annual bonfire out at Frank's farmstead was the semi-adult one. Pretty much everyone between the ages of 15 and 60 showed up, provided they can get a ride or pawn their kids off on a relative. My parents never attended, even when Eliza was alive, but I'd seen Ryan mom a time or two, and Cassie's parents were fixtures. I hadn't planned on attending tonight, but Cassie and Ryan haven't given me a choice, captive as I was in the backseat of Cassie's truck. "We won't stay long," Cassie said over my protest. "I promise." "If you're not having fun, I'll run you home," Ryan said, which was a vow easier made than executed. The bonfire usually drew hundreds of people from not only Ludlow, but also Neosho, Boone, and every tiny burg in between. Finding Ryan if I lost track of him could take all night. By the time we arrived, after a quick stop at Sonic for cheeseburgers and shakes, the bonfire was already hopping. Cars parked haphazardly along the road and ringing the edge of field where two giant fires were burning, sending furrows of black smoke into the darkened sky. Music blared from speakers set up next to dozens of large coolers stuffed full of beers and hard seltzer, and clusters of people dotted the field, some dancing, some chatting, some playing cornhole by the light of the fires. The same as it had always been, but there was a new edge to the proceedings tonight. The faint feeling that things could go off the rails at any second. The need to blow off steam and have some fun after the recent murderers easily crossing the line into chaos. "I can't even hear myself think," I yelled, taking the drink Cassie passed me. "I'm pretty sure thinking isn't required," Ryan said. "That's kind of the point." "Touche," I said, knocking my can against his as I scanned the crowd. Most people looked to be in the early stages of getting sloshed, but a woman about our age, looking none too steady on her feet, performed a sad solo bumping grind, arms aloof, cigarette in one hand and beer in the other. Her beach blonde hair was tangled and greasy, and her skinny legs were mottled with bruises. That's her. Let's see who it is. Chip red polish on her fingernails. Holy shit. No wonder she looked familiar yesterday in the park. I pointed with my chin. "Is that Amber Stevens?" "Uh-huh," Cassie said. "She's come down a few pegs." Amber had been the most popular girl in our high school class. She claimed the crown at the end of 6th grade and hung on for the next 6 years with teeth and nails, equal parts malice and manipulation. The kind of poison package most high school boys are too dumb to resist. I thought she married Chad right after we graduated, had her perfect life all worked out. "She thought she did," Cassie said, "until Chad divorced her, moved away with some new chick, and left Amber with 3 babies, no job, and a ton of debt. Last I heard, she was courting a pretty serious oxy habit, and her kids were in foster care." "I'm surprised she's not in jail," Ryan said. "She tried to steal a bunch of shit from the hardware store recently, but was too fucked up to even make it out the door. Amber and I had never been friendly, but I felt a sharp pang of sympathy when I thought of her pinned to a tree. I had a pretty good idea how she gotten away with her attempted hardware heist. Remember how pissed she was when Travis picked Eliza over her? Oh my God, like, what does he see in her? Ryan said, voice high in imitation. I remembered how after the murders, she told everyone who would listen how lucky she was that she hadn't been interested in Travis way back when. Otherwise, she could have been the one dead in his front seat. Revisiting history rendered with a spiteful kind of glee. We watched as Amber tripped over a couple next to her, landing hard on her ass. She tossed her beer can at the woman who dodged out of her way. Stupid cunt, Amber screamed. Jesus, I said, what a mess. I try to feel bad for her, Ryan said, but she makes it hard. Come on, Cassie said, let's mingle. Mingling with this crowd was the last thing I wanted to do, but I let myself be led into the fray, fingers hooked loosely through the back belt loop of Ryan jeans. I threw vague smiles out when I heard people call my name, but let my gaze skate over most of the faces, getting just a glimpse before we moved past. I saw Eric and Faith in the near distance, his arm slung across her shoulders while she chatted with the woman next to her. When Eric spotted me, I raised my hand in greeting, but he only stared back, his mouth a grim line. I looked away and my eyes snagged on a newly familiar face. Loosening my grip on Ryan's jeans, I spun back into the crowd. Hey, Libby, I said, sliding up to where she stood near the largest bonfire. The smoke burned my eyes and coiled its claws into my chest. She squinted at me, recognition dawning. Oh, hey, Dean's girl, right? Close enough. He here? Libby asked, downing the last of her beer and tossing the can to the ground. I have no idea. She hooted at that. See? Already moving on, huh? Told you. He's a real son of a bitch. He pretends to be nice, pretends to care about you, but his brother wasn't the only one with a mean streak. Only difference is with Dean, you don't expect it. A gust of cold air blew hard across the field, and I was suddenly glad for the bonfire, smoke and all. Libby took a step away from me. I need another beer. Here, I said, passing her mine. It's practically full. Thanks. She took the can and tipped it to her mouth, swallowing what had to be half the content in one long gulp. Someone pushed into me from behind, sending me stumbling forward towards the bonfire. Oops, sorry, a voice said close to my ear. I glanced over my shoulder and found Amber's smirking face. Libby girl, she screeched, her eyes falling away from mine. How you been? You two know each other? I asked. Not really, Libby said. We worked together for a while, a couple of years ago. Where your friends at? Amber asked me. You always did travel in a pack. She hooked her thumb at me, but turned her face back to Libby. Her best friend's a carpet muncher. Nice, I said. She cackled. God, you've always been so easy to fuck with. But tell me the truth. You into that girl-on-girl stuff now, too? Not yet, but the night's still young. Libby snorted into her beer can and Amber's mouth twisted. You better stay away from her, Libby, she warned. That shit rubs off. Well, considering the men around here, might not be a bad choice, Libby said. She held out her fist to me, and after a second's awkward hesitation, I bumped mine off it. You know who she is, right? Amber said, giving me a vicious side eye. I should have known that even drunk and drugged, she always held this trump card in reserve. She never did like anyone stealing her thunder. Who is? Libby asked, eyes scanning the crowd instead of focusing on Amber. This one. Amber stumbled into me again, harder this time. Her sister, the girl that Roy murdered. She made her fingers into a gun and pointed at her own head, lips blowing a blowing a raspberry as she pulled the trigger. Libby's gaze flew to mine, her mouth forming an O of surprise. Wait, she said, but you were with Dean the other day. Why? She was with Dean? Amber screeched. Like with him? Holy fuck. A laugh brayed out of her, scraping along my nerves endings. I pivoted away from both of them, Libby with her confused eyes and Amber with her cruel mouth, and pushed my way into the crowd, let it swallow me up. I only made it about 5 steps before someone collided with me, grabbing my arm as I staggered sideways. Hey now, a familiar voice drawled. How drunk are you? Judging from the look of him and the smell too, Garrett was the drunk one. I was about 1 second away from telling him that, shaking off his arm and demanding that Ryan and Cassie get me out of here, when my conversation with Baker at the fall festival suddenly came back to me. Here, right in front of me, and a few too many beers in, was definitely a dumber fish. Not drunk at all, I said with a smile, adding a little slur to my words for good measures. You're the one who bumped into me. Garrett laughed, slid his hand down my arm, and laced our fingers together, like prom night was only yesterday and we were still on a date. I don't know about that. You're looking a little unsteady on your feet. He tipped his head down to me, and I fought not to recoil from the stale beer fumes of his breath. Want to go someplace less crowded? You can sit down, rest that pretty ass of yours. What a charmer. That 3rd grade teacher Garrett was attempting to 2-time sure was a lucky girl. But I nodded, let him lead me through the crowd and into the dark edges of the party, the kind of shadowy no man's land where nothing good ever happened. Here, Garrett said, pointing to a log on the ground. He sat with a grunt, pulling me down beside him. Any hope I had some space between us disappeared as he used our still joined hand to yank me closer, mashing his thighs up against mine. Don't want you getting cold. Thanks, I said. He was right about one thing. It was definitely brisk out here, beyond the reach of the bonfire and the press of too many bodies. Overhead, black clouds scudded across the navy blue sky. A storm was rolling in. I could smell damp and ozone on the breeze. Why have you been driving by my house at night? I blurted out. Not exactly the conversational opening I had planned, but Garrett seemed completely unfazed by my question. Took a long swallow from his beer before he answered. Keeping an eye on you is all, he said. And rumor has it, you've been hanging around some unsavory company. I signed, tried unsuccessfully to wiggle my hand out of his, but Garrett and Libby, the whole town was going to know my business by morning. Between Garrett and Libby, the whole town was going to know my business by morning. I thought briefly about arguing, but didn't see the point. Someone had seen me and Dean together, either Garrett himself or someone he trusted. Denial seemed like a waste of my time. You're talking about Dean Matthews, right? Garrett turned to face me. Yeah, I am. What in the hell are you thinking, Greer, hanging around with that loser? What bullshit is he feeding you? He's not feeding me anything. Right, Garrett scoffed, tossed his beer can into the shadows behind us. He's got an interest in having you believe certain things. Let me guess. He's trying to tell you Roy was innocent or that he was framed. He kicked out at the grass. What bullshit. He's not trying to get me to believe anything, I said. I barely know the guy. I've talked to him once or twice. Not what I heard, Garrett muttered. Well, then you heard wrong. I'm not hanging around with him. Garrett glanced at me. Yeah? I scooted closer, pushed my shoulders against his, trying hard to conjure up the flirty tone of voice I used on him back when we were teenagers. Yeah. Why you wanted to talk to him in the first place? I shrugged. I don't know. I wanted to see if he knew more about the new murders than what I heard around town. Nobody will tell me anything. I guess I got desperate. It was dumb of me, baiting my hook and holding my breath. You could have asked me. He stroked the back of my hand with his thumb. I tried that before. You said you couldn't tell me. Infusing my voice with the right amount of pout was harder than I remembered. Did I really used to put this much energy into pleasing boys? That's because there's nothing to tell. But his eyes slid away from mine as he spoke. The oldest tale in the book. Garrett wasn't only the dumber fish, he also wasn't a very good cop. Oh, come on, I said. I know you're hiding something. I pulled my hand out of his and laid it on his thigh instead. I won't tell anyone, I swear. He looked down at my fingers splayed across his jeans and reached for my arm. For a second, I thought he was going to drag my hand higher onto his private part. And I wonder how far I was willing to go with this charade. But he only turned my hand over, exposing my wrist. The killer drew something with Abby's blood, he said, voice low enough that I had to lean closer to hear him. On her arm, right here. He tapped his index finger against the pale, delicate skin of her inner wrist. My pulse thrummed, blue veins jumping, but not from his touch. What was it? I asked. My breath was coming too fast, shimmering black stars exploding in my peripheral vision. But I already knew before he traced a familiar shape with his finger, goosebumps racing up my arms, knew before the words ever left his mouth. It was a red heart, he said, a Valentine. And that's the end of chapter 14. Well. Garrett is a mess. He is a hot mess. He obviously ain't grow up. He's still doing teenage stuff. Okay. Anything about this chapter? I don't think too much was said in this chapter. I'm trying to think. Yeah, not too much was said in this chapter. I think it's getting ready to get to a point where something is getting ready to be known. But, oh yeah, Dylan in the beginning, when Dylan was like he needed to get out of Ludlow. I wonder why he needed to get out of Ludlow. Could Dylan... I'm trying to put pieces together. Could Dylan know something about the murders of Eliza and Travis? And could somebody have killed him because it's to shut him up of something he know? I don't know. But yeah, like I said, it wasn't too much to this, but I'm gonna just see y'all in the next chapter. Bye for now.